Welcome to Brainstorm MTG. I'm ELD, and this is Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. Here we have Death Shadow versus Blue-Red Delver. Starting out with a Ponder on turn 1, seeing Street Wraith and perhaps another land. Daze looks like a Fatal Push, perhaps. We'll see how this hand unfolds. Definitely a Reanimate. Blue-Red Delver, not quite as aggressive as just straight burn. Brainstorm. We definitely have Street Wraith and Reanimate assembled. See if that's actually a line that gets taken. Volcanic Island. Looks like Stifle coming down. Daze on Stifle, and see how this sequence plays out. It's unlikely that he has any more counter magic. It is the type of thing people often will fight over. Cycling Street Wraith and reanimating Street Wraith, going to 11. So Death Shadows are online. It does set a bit of a clock. May need to pump the brakes in terms of the intentional life loss. Daze on Young Pyromancer. And 8. Make a 5/5 Death Shadow, setting a 2-turn clock. And not be lethal even if it goes to 1. And going to 1 versus Blue-Red Delver, very, very dicey. You pretty much want to assume they have a bolt at all times. Not want to just get within burn range intentionally. Young Pyromancer coming down. 1 mana available to Blue-Red Delver. Brainstorm. Get to see Force of Will plus a blue card. And fetch back those Underground Seas, which are shuffled back into the deck. And here comes some damage. Brainstorm creating a token. That's going to be able to absorb half of this attack. Young Pyromancer's ability to go wide, typically for offense, but against Death Shadow, very often going to be playing a defensive route. The Street Wraith does not have evasion versus a deck full of islands and mountains. So much of the format plays swamps such as Underground Sea that it's easy to kind of forget the lack of evasion against the rest of the field. It's just a 3/4 here. And another Death Shadow. Tense situation here. Death Shadows can potentially just go to lethal. We've got a fetch land in hand. Another Young Pyromancer. That can just clog up the board. Something fierce. Without a Toxic Deluge main deck, this may be time to Force a Will that. Anything else is going to start creating multiple tokens. Be very easy to swarm around a singleton blocker even. Couple of end step effects, especially burn to the face. I mean, this is As much as it feels bad to get rid of that Brainstorm, I think it's got to be the play. In order to get this Death Shadow to lethal from 13, we're going to need to go to 3. Does he have the bolt? So sending with both. And just a block. So down to 6. Lightning bolt to the face. Bad news. Wasteland. Gets rid of that watery grave. There's the other bolt. So double bolt for exact damage there. Tony taking down game 1. Interesting seeing this game played out again. There really is a balance of preserving life for those end game situations, but also getting those death shadows online. That is a game where literally 1 point of life would have made the difference. One of the reasons why the deck does so well with hard counters. Being able to have force of will along with stubborn denial to legitimately shut everything down, not just tempo counters like days, makes a huge difference. You really do need to stabilize at low life and make sure that that lethal spell does not resolve. And days just can't give you that type of certainty. Taking a look at the sideboarding options here. Reanimating a young Pyromancer would probably be quite good in Death Shadow. It certainly has a bunch of cantrips that would counteract opposing young Pyromancers quite well. Reanimate, just a really great addition to these lists. The standard line of just hitting your Street Wraith that you've cycled, you pretty much always have targets for it, and then occasionally you're going to get back things that are much better, like a Death Shadow. And then on the other side of the board, sometimes they have something super juicy in the graveyard, be it a Gristlebrand or even an Eternal Witness or a Young Pyromancer. There are very often great targets in your opponent's side. And for just 1 black mana and life that you were looking to offload anyways, it's a hell of a bargain. Not a ton in the sideboard here. It looks like Dazes are coming out. Not entirely sure the strongest way to sideboard here. Doesn't feel like there's a ton of cards that you actually want to stop, but I think because of the the kind of the tactical problem of trying to lower your life versus a deck that's got a ton of burn, you do need to actually have a complete stabilization. Versus other Delver strategies, I may be looking to cut Force of Will if they don't have access to burn. But you know, Death Shadow does have some very significant interactions to be concerned about when you're playing in a tournament. Versus decks that have red, you've got that burn element. Versus decks that have access to white, you're looking at Swords to Plowshares and the difficulty of using Death Shadow as a win condition. You always lose your Death Shadows. Like if you have multiple Death Shadows, a Swords to Plowshares will always get rid of all of them. And even if you have a Gurmag in a Death Shadow, it's very often that Swordsing the Gurmag will get rid of the Death Shadow. So Sword's a real problem for the deck. as is efficient burn. Scholars, where this and many of these videos have been shot, will be closing October 5th. So if you've ever wanted to make it down to the store, you're in the New England area, every Wednesday night, 5 o'clock Pauper, 7:30 Legacy, and that will all be coming to a close on October 5th. So I've been going to Scholars for nearly 25 years, since the beginning of the game almost. I got in during Revised, and it was the site of my first vintage tournament so many years ago. It was called Type 1. Of course, Legacy has grown to be a format that I really love since then. Pauper, 93, 94, both new formats that are really just exceptional. So happy to see Magic doing as well as it is. Looking forward to whatever the next step is for me and for the channel. But in the meanwhile, we're trying to have as much fun as we can at Scholars before those doors close for good. Tony, actually a player from somewhat back in the day. To play at the old location down on the Rotary, Bridgewater, Mass. Previous owner. And I am not sure what the holdup is. It looks like we're ready to go now. Here we get going. And Death Shadow in hand. And it is going to be the Watery Grave plan here. Going to need to get under 10 in order to make all of this happen. Really is a question of whether or not you can afford to let your opponent push you down to under 10. With burn, that would be fine if they're just throwing bolts at my face, but if it's with creatures, it really doesn't change that much. They're still going to have plenty of options. And looks like this might be a really fast game one way or another. Stifle on a fetch land here. It looks like thinking this through. There's a Force of Will. Actually gonna do it. Force pitching Force. That is aggro. Be aggressive. Be aggressive. Street Wraith coming back. Death Shadow. This is a super aggro opening versus a basic forest, a basic island. Young Pyromancer comes down. Him to Torok. He gets to keep one card here. And this is some Mother Gorilla defending Baby Gorilla savagery. No blocks. Gonna pump the brakes a little bit. So that Death Shadow only gonna do 8. And the other Death Shadow comes down. Grim Lava Man, that is not gonna do, sir. These Death Shadows are gonna have to be chump blocked, both of them. Removal just wins the game. There we go. 3 more life chipped away. He's down to 5. Gonna need a pair of burn spells to finish it off. And that is not found. So Death Shadow doing exactly what it's designed to do there. Super aggressive. Even against a deck with burn in it there. Just not enough time. And taking a look, eyeballing Liliana. Gonna look at those dazes. They are gonna be much worse on the draw. Perhaps questioning the removal slots. Feels to me like this deck wants to come out swinging. It looks like the Thoughtseize is getting swapped out for the Dazes. Gonna hope to protect effects like Stifle a little bit more, from effects like Stifle a little more efficiently than having to force of will it. Dazing a Stifle feels a lot better. And Thoughtseize, a reasonable card in this matchup, I suppose. It does have a question mark on it when you're looking for cards to sideboard out. Thoughtseize taking Lightning Bolt is extremely weak. And Thoughtseize getting Lightning Bolted in response and getting nothing is just worse. Looks like Death Shadow, Force of Will, got some lands. Not great. See if anything is drawn that helps improve it, because it is being kept regardless. I forget the name of this card. You can let me know in the comments. Every time he damages an opponent, you put counters on him. He's a 1/1 haste for 1, and then you can pay a red and sack him to discard your hand and get all of those cards that are underneath him back. I'm sorry, it doesn't put counters. It exiles cards from the top of your library. Let me know. The card in the past has seemed to be pretty terrible. We'll see how it works out here. I know I talked to Rich Shea about that card quite a bit, and in the end, it did not work out in some different Delver style strategies. See if it's good enough for blue-red Delver here. Wasteland and Snuff Out. Targeting, which finds a Spell Pierce. So still don't know the name of that creature, but he is sticking around, chipping away 1 damage at a time, potentially getting a whole fresh hand of cards underneath him. Death Shadow comes down. He is a 4/4. That should stop the beatings for now. And it does indeed, passing the turn back. Gurmag Angler about ready to come out and play. Wasteland's going to try and clear out that volcanic island first. Brainstorm in response to Wasteland. That is what I would call a protected Brainstorm. If I did try and counter that, if he dazed in response, that would be a total blowout. I've made that line stick so many times. Anytime that you can have access to daze or gush in response to destruction effects on the stack, things like Wasteland or Strip Mine, that is super powerful. Also love to set up misdirection along with stifle effects. I've always been a big fan of that. Somebody Wastelands fetching in response, then misdirecting. There's a whole bunch of shenanigans that can ensue, but that's for another time here, because we've got some cantripping happening from Tony. He's got his basic island and basic mountain. Looks like an engineered explosives. Is not great. Both of these 1/1s for 1. So after no blocks here, just gonna fetch, chip away 6, and potentially threaten lethal here the next turn. And Gurmag Angler coming down. So 7 life here for Death Shadow. Oh, and Daze on Gurmag, something you don't see that often. Had 2 mana and exactly the right amount of cards in graveyard. That is brutal. Lightning Bolt happens here. And now at 3 damage, at 3 health. Does he have a bolt? Force of Will is in hand. And he just goes for it here. Force, no blue card, and that is it. Very risky, swinging first. Probably should have checked to see if that resolved. If not, he would have been dead on the crackback. But YOLO, blue-red Delver takes it down. That's all for this one. If you enjoyed the video, please help grow the channel by subscribing. You'll be notified when we upload new videos like Fast Effect, Double Speed Magic with commentary, or Untapped, our raw tournament gameplay. Thanks for watching.